okay with everybody. And you are very welcome formally this evening. Great to see you all. And as I've already said, I hope you had a fantastic bank holiday weekend, and it's really great to see you this evening. Session 4, we are halfway there, or at least you will be in an hour and a half or a little bit less than that. How time flies. It is going extraordinarily quickly. And we're going to move fairly quickly this evening, if that's okay with you all, because I have a little bit of content to get through with you. And I want to make sure we also give you a little bit of time for the assignment one that I know is in many people's minds. Yes, I heard somebody coming in there. Who can I help?
That's me. Hello.
Hello, Margazata. Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And
okay,
you?
Great.
Yeah. Anything we can help with, or will I keep going?
Not bad.
You're okay. Good.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I was actually making coffee.
Very good. Okay. Well, Malgorzata, I am going to keep going, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Go. Sorry,
Brilliant.
actually, to disturb you.
That's brilliant. Okay. Well, lovely to see you. Great to see everybody. There might be one or two things coming through in the chat, so I'll keep an eye all out on that. Actually, I have one thing in the chat. Hi, all. It's the first webinar I've been able to join live. I've heard reference to a WhatsApp group in the recording. So anyone who's able to help with WhatsApp groups, that might just help everybody out in the meeting chat. So you're very welcome formally and officially, as I say. It's just lovely to see this air of spring and whatnot about us. So that's fantastic. We are, as I say, kind of halfway there in terms of our sessions together. We're in session 4 of 8. And we're on the brink of this assignment 1. So what I'm going to do this evening is bring you through the 3 final kind of core competencies of agile, innovation, and open. And we will have a little bit of time left at the end to go through assignment because you will all be thinking and furiously working, I know, between now and Friday the 11th of April, when the submission of assignment 1 is due. So let's run through that again. After our session last week, I did update the kind of templates document, and I've uploaded that to IOB Learn, and I even popped that out in your WhatsApp group. I even put it out into another WhatsApp group by mistake, so everybody knows. But anyway, well and good. I'd rather be belt and braces than none at all. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that as well this evening. So let me get through the content, because that's what's really kind of fundamental, and then we'll kind of keep ourselves 10 minutes at the end and make sure we take a little bit of time to go through the assignment as well, and leave you in good shape, because I'm not going to see you for 3-4 weeks until Saturday the 12th of April, at which point your assignments should be in. So important that we kind of sign off well this evening. So let's help each other to work towards that. A little bit of rolling reportage, nothing too much for you this evening, other than a 200-page report that you can, if you choose, read from the Future Today strategy group. They used to be called the Future Today Institute. This is one of my seminal readings every year. There's a lady called Amy Webb. She's the CEO of this group, and they are probably the most easily consumed but yet comprehensive set of futurists who publish their wares every year. So FTSG, there's a link at the bottom. It's a 200-page report that you can get your teeth into. I did read most of it over the weekend, didn't get all of it, but it is a sumptuous report, well worth the read. But actually, you can read, there's actually one page you can read like this, which is the key takeaways, and there's about 40 slides that you can read in behind it. It only takes you about 15 minutes to read them, because it's big words. It's like ladybird books, and it works really well. And then when you go into the other 160 slides, you go into loads and loads of detail. And they are the top 2025 tech trends that they're reporting on and talking about. If you want to even do I'll come to you now, Ronan, if you want to even do a speedier but more immersive experience, you can check out Amy's 2025 presentation at SXSW, big event in the US every year. It's only the last couple of weeks. And she talks and brings the 10 trends to life. If you're into trying to understand the future for the purposes of just sheer entertainment, bewilderment, or what I'm mostly interested in consuming is for strategic thinking. It is a fabulous report, and you'll see, if you remember last week I showed you Helix, this idea of the vision, language, action model. It was interesting. I was reading it at the weekend, and actually trends 1 to 4 all talk about robotics and agentic systems and these action models, and you'll see it referred to different names. They've got vision language models and lots of different things, but it's and no more than you go everywhere. Actually, it was on a CB Insights webinar this evening. Again, you know, AI, robotics, agentics, etc. It's just everywhere right now. But you might have overdosed on it, I get that. But definitely, if you get a chance, worth taking a little delve into the report, the 200 pages. You can read the exec summary on one page, which is there, or you can listen to Amy, and she's an entertaining speaker and definitely worth having a go at. Now, Ronan, sorry, I sidestepped you, sir, so I'm going to step back into your breach again.
Apologies, Garvin. Maybe it's just me with the feedback on the line. It's a bit hard to hear you.
Is
Mute or something.
it's hard to hear me, is it?
Just there's a bit of feedback on the line for whatever reason. So I just,
okay, yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Good heads up. I'll tell you what. Let me check my audio here. On my because I've noticed on Zoom it's hard to feed you guys. Is there a little bit of whirring going on in the background, Ronan? Is that it?
yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, the fan on my laptop is whizzing away here in the background. I would say that that's causing a little bit of it.
No worries. It seems to be down there now, so hopefully that's it.
Yeah, let me try. Right, I did try a different option there, but that didn't seem to work very well. Ronan, have I lost you? Let me check out with somebody else. No,
It's not good for me, Garvin. Was good before, but now it's yeah.
is it okay now again?
It was
Yeah.
okay before.
Yeah, it's okay.
Now.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, now again.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
fine now.
Okay, and Ronan, it looks like you were frozen there, and I know you were coming out a bit jittery, so maybe between the two of us it's not great. So, okay, will we keep going, folks? Will we keep trying? If this is not working, just I'll pause and stop. But will we keep going? Get your show of hands or get some thumbs ups. Yeah. Okay.
It's fine.
It's fine. Keep going. Okay, I'll keep going. Okay, brilliant stuff. Right, so I've covered off that in terms of the future strategy group or future today strategy group. Really worth having a look at, and also signing up for the material. They do send stuff out. It's great to see you last week. I think it was last week we were together, and I covered off efficiency, and was really trying to implore upon you that after getting with the customer. The next place you need to go is you need to clear the decks, clear out the closets, clear some space, because you're going to innovate for the customer. But to do so, you've got to simplify to accelerate. And I kind of talked to you about how we can look at front of house levers and back of house levers. And this was kind of really the key slide that I was sharing with you. So hopefully you picked up on my implorations for the necessity for simplification to make it easier for everybody to do business in the first place. And then also to get rid of the waste so that we can create some capacity. I may not have covered this, but really important as well when we're thinking about processes and when we're thinking about journeys. Again, to find the waste and eliminate it before you automate and digitize or digitalize them, because there's no point in digitalizing, automating, and applying AI to bad processes, because you're only really, you know what you're doing. So really is a core fundamental of what we want to do. I talked to you about digital and talked to you about really, when we're thinking about engagement, the importance of understanding where and how and why we're trying to meet the market, and then kind of building a comprehensive channel strategy that allows you to blend the physical and the digital channels in order to, enable, stronger business development, convert sales into holdings, and ultimately to serve the customer, and then, to perpetually build the relationship. And I kind of give you the little matrix at the bottom, which says, digital will be usually more applied to simple, high volume and low value. Whereas the physical channels, we as humans, whether it's in a physical place or whether it's through a virtual environment, typically are better applied to the more complex, the less frequent, or and definitely the higher value areas as well. And we talked about multi-channel, omni-channel, and opti-channel. This idea of designing to give the best experience, to command a premium, but also designing so that that best experience is most efficiently deployed. And the two things that are really sitting behind that channel strategy and that digital engagement is about finding a way to command a premium through customer centricity, which you need an efficiency for, and then trying to do it really efficiently, which is this channel management is a core part of that as well. And I would have given you this digital engagement framework. It was quite a bit of detail in your packs, but really pointing you towards being really clear about that channel and engagement strategy, and then understanding how you construct user experience, how you market, and how you execute brand and amplification in the marketplace. And then we also touched on digital product management. And we will come back, folks, when we're doing our full day, and people will be spending more time on digital product management. And we'll spend a little bit of time on the three topics today. And then, of course, there's always the underpin of digital analytics and insights. And then, of course, the technology that's necessary, the platforms and the tools, as well as the skills and the methodologies to enable this digital engagement. I did also touch in with you on data analytics, and I shared with you this maturity model. I mean, it starts with data. You can't move forward without that being constructive, and the idea of moving from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive. And ultimately where we're seeing the creative AI emerge now, which is in the prescriptive and the creative spaces as well. So hopefully you got from me this idea that data and analytics, and we talk about them in those regards, is get the data right and apply analytics. That analytics has a maturity model, and that can be applied in all quarters or in all corners of your organization, whether it's to support what you're trying to do in the market with customers or partners or wherever it is, or what you're trying to do in terms of risk or your core product. That's risk because a lot of folks here are from the financial services industry. Equally, data analytics can be applied to support, for better insight and better systems and tools, and ultimately enable our people and our organizations, and obviously our operations and our technology as well. So hopefully you got those and kind of brought you through then finally, what does it take? Well, again, it's, takes that business, that data at the core, and the kind of the first pass. And I showed you last week, don't have it here, but I showed you last week this idea of the value tree, and that's around understanding business demand. So where do we want to deploy analytics on the data we have? Well, we need to understand, is that in the customer sphere? Is it in the product or the risk sphere, in the people sphere, in the operations sphere? And once we do that, well, then we can start developing a strategy. We can understand what we need in terms of leadership and talent, and then the tools and the models that sit behind that. And then we can figure out, how do we work to bring data products to life, and how do we get our organizations and ultimately everybody who plays a part in getting value from data analytics, how do we help them to adopt? That could be colleagues, could be the end customer, could be partners, brokers, etc., etc., etc. And that's kind of simply how you think about building a data analytics strategy on a page. So hopefully you all got a chance to have a look through that. Hopefully you all had a little flick through the reading in advance for today. Nothing too heavy in there. If you have any thoughts on the pre-reading, please pop it into the chat as we go along. There's a lovely old article. It's kind of one of those timeless ones about agile at scale from Harvard Business Review, and just talks about, and I'll touch on some of this today, but it's a nice accompaniment to what I'm going to share with you today. Agile is hard. Agile is difficult. Most organizations that have done it, are attempting to do it, or have mastered it, will have gone through eras of darkness. It is because it's it's a philosophical change for how many organizations have started out, some of which we'll go through today. And that's a nice accompaniment to kind of give you a pathways through how to go from one team to a few teams to even going through to teams of hundreds and scaled agile. And again, I'll touch on some of that today. So a nice accompaniment if you get a chance to read that. I did direct you then in the pre-reads towards the Board of Innovation, BOI, not Bank of Ireland, the Board of Innovation. And there's just a kind of really simple articles about how to assess your company's level of innovation. I'm going to show you a scorecard for that. If you haven't looked at the slides already, I did upload them last week, so you'll get a chance to look through those. And then innovation programs and pitfalls. Again, I'm going to share with you some materials this evening on that, but nice augments in that regard. Shared with you a little Gartner article, which just nicely frames this idea of there's different ways to invoke innovation in your organization. You can tell people to do it or invite people to do it. It's kind of at the heart of it. And depending on where you are, the scale at which you want to go to, you know, how mysterious or not what you're trying to innovate upon, and how open you are around your efforts, you might want to apply, you know, different ways to crowd innovate. And this is really about crowd innovation. Again, I'm going to show you a slide or two on that today. So a nice accompaniment that I have in the background. And then finally, I did point you towards Accenture's open banking site. And when you go in there, I mean, they're updating it all the time. But actually as a resource on open banking, I do find that Accenture have probably Deloitte are good, but Accenture have probably the most progressive and expansive, but yet very consumable writing around what is over open banking. There's a lot of good material in there on the moment around what's happening across the globe, Canada, Australia, Europe, US, etc., and that blurring the lines, that's I don't think that was referred to in your study guide, but when I went in to check a couple of weeks ago and I was getting the slides ready for this evening, that was a new report in there, and they give a good synopsis. I don't have time to go into it this evening, but they give a good synopsis of how and where open banking and ecosystems or ecosystem thinking, how that's maturing, and how regulatory environments are facilitating that to happen, and how adopters are leading or not on it as a realm that's probably moving slower in our in the financial services industry. Again, I have to remember that we've people from beyond financial services, but it's maybe moving slower in financial services than it is in some other industries. So again, good accompaniment in the background for some of the material that we're going to cover off this evening. Liz, how are you?
I am well, Garvin, thank you. I just have a quick question on the open. So I was doing some of the reading, and then I was looking at the exam question as well. And I kind of got a little bit confused around open, because it's just called open. So is it, as you've said, open banking, but then I came across kind of open collaboration. Are they one and the same, or are they different? Yeah,
that's a great question. I'm going to go through it this evening, Liz, and hopefully that will, I'm going to go through it this evening with you, and hopefully that will explain it. But at its fundamental, lots of industries have come from closed, and basically that's the idea that you are going to proprietarily build your product, go to market, and try and command all the value. And what technology has enabled people to do, and then we've seen the emergence of platforms, Liz. Platforms are kind of the kind of proprietary business, where the platform creates kind of multi-sided relationships or partnerships, where the platform allows buyers and sellers to come together. And that's a kind of a true open business. So it is by its very virtue, it's an exchange, or it's creating a place where people can come and collaborate. It could be collaborate for services, for products, or it could be just for information. And lots of the platforms that we think about, the social platforms, are just collaboration for information and emotional purposes. So it's kind of all of them, Liz. But let me unpack it a little bit with you this evening and see if that makes sense. Is that okay?
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's probably the most complex one. It sits at the apex of our It's at the apex of our 7 core competencies. So I'm probably going to spend the most time on that one this evening, if that's okay.
That's great. Excellent.
Yeah, let me see if I can do a reasonable job of answering your question more comprehensively than I've just done, and I've got some materials to help us do that. Okay, brilliant. How's everybody doing? Hear me okay? How's the audio? Is it okay?
Good.
Yeah, doing okay. Okay, brilliant stuff. Okay, we ready to charge forth and cover off agile innovation and open. And look, this is a continuation of these building blocks. They start from customer centricity. There, you liberate resources and also improve what you have today through efficiency and simplification. Then you can start thinking about, digitally engaging propositions, and then you're in the process of digitizing, automating, etc., and then you create the data footprint, and then you can start applying analytics. But behind all those, or what people find is when they're endeavoring to command those first 4, there are 3 really critical enablers, which is the ability to be agile, the ability to innovate, and the ability to be open. So that's why I'm kind of clustering them together this evening. And that's what we are going to spend our time on. Most of you will know, practiced, have seen, or be masters of agile. If you are, please share with us your perspectives as you go through this. Really, what's at the heart of this is, this is an art rather than a science, and it's much misunderstood, I think. So I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can this evening. And it's really about finding methods and philosophies to help go faster in business, because technology typically allows us to go faster. Because once we digitalize, and transform, that we have our businesses coded, well then typically you can recode and you can develop in a very fast way, as opposed to in the analog world where we had everything physically really hard to change physical things. It's much simpler to change digital things, and that allows for creativity. But there's something that's really important that links back to customer centricity. The essence of agile is about being customer centric. As usual, all these slides are for you to kind of read away in the background. I'm going to kind of bring you to the really important ones. And really it kind of starts and stops with this one, which is the agile backdrop and ultimately the agile manifesto. And I was kind of, it's over 20 years old now. But the essence of it was, when engineers started to build their worlds and build their propositions and build their businesses in code, they said, we can do things different, we can do things better. Let's create the principles, or let's create the manifesto, which gave rise to the principles and the values for adopting this agile way of thinking, which enables an agile way of working, which enables customer centricity at pace. And that's, for me, is what the essence of agile is. So there's a link there. I do encourage you, if you've never gone in, go and read the Agile Manifesto. It's about, a principle of, and a principle is a way of thinking and then a way of acting, of uncovering better ways of using software to apply to the 4 principles. And the 4 principles talk about coming together and working together. So individuals and interactions are much more important than process and tools, because we're human and coders are human. So it's really important that this Agile Manifesto was built for humans to use technology in a smarter, more efficient, more productive and a speedier way. It kind of epitomized, and it spoke about and bestowed this idea that working software is much more effective and compelling over comprehensive documentation. So what does that really mean? It means when we come in to solve a problem, let's build solutions in software as opposed to write down the problem in old traditional ways and try and, let's try and build a solution as opposed to define the problem. So it's a kind of a really fundamental shift in how projects were run and how, businesses tackled, the opportunities that they wanted to pursue and also maybe some of the challenges that they were facing. So it bestowed, or it kind of, gave life to this idea of, when we see a problem, let's try and build software to solve it, as opposed to write down the problem and trying to go through a long way of solving it. Customer collaboration is key. It's much more important than contract negotiation. In other words, it's not about the product, it's about putting the customer. So customer obsession is really at the heart of the manifesto and as the way of working. And then responding to change, so allowing for adaptability within the development life cycles is much more important than following a plan. We'll come back to that and we'll see how that works. And you can read, hopefully you're reading them there as I'm talking, you can read the 12 values, which really kind of bring that to much more fully to life about, the highest priority, the top thing is to solve for the customer. And it's to do that in bite sizes by, developing software, presenting it to the customer, seeing how they react, and iterating forward. And much of the agile way is about kind of that lightweight, flexible, and efficient software development to solve for customers. And the idea of doing it in really short cycles is so that it can be tested, and then as it's tested, that should redefine your requirements. So, what's different between waterfall and agile? In waterfall, you started out, absolutely concrete on what you were going to do, how long it would take you to do it, etc., and you just followed that, slavishly, and you didn't allow for adaptability. So the big thing that's many people will say is different is this latitude for flexibility, and that brings uncertainty, and especially for those for bosses who want to know what they're going to get at the end, and particularly in relation to the budget that they might apply to an agile team. And that does facilitate a leap of faith. And in my experience, is probably one of the biggest things that organizations have to navigate is leaders letting go, leaders empowering their team to identify what's important to the customer, develop software to solve for that, for them to do it at speed, small chunks, weeks at a time, for that to iterate and to continue to follow what the customer is feeding back to you, and to allow that to become your driving force and in your guiding light in terms of what to do. Business people and developers working together, etc., etc. I mean, lots of good things that go down through the values, and the last one's really important as well, because it's kind of, maybe back, Liz, to your point, what is agile? Hopefully this is kind of bringing it to life a little bit for you. But point 12 is agile is essentially a guidebook, and it's only a guidebook, right? It's a kind of set of guiding principles and values to allow different people from different domains to come together, to put the customer at the center, to build working software to solve for them, to do that frequently. And then, also in agile, you have ceremonies, and in ceremonies, that allows you an opportunity to prioritize.
I only remember that there's one downstairs. I was like, rag.
Somebody coming in there, so you might just keep your mute on. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully we've everybody.
I've got monitors downstairs.
Let me go and test that, folks, and see who we might, whoever it is might know that they're not on mute. Just having a look there at everybody. Yes, I think everyone's on mute now, so all good. If you're not on mute, please do pop yourself on mute. Okay, I've kind of muted everybody there, so that's all good. Right, okay, so back to Liz's point. What is it? It's a whole, open is a whole bundle of things, but it kind of links back to collaboration, and actually agile is the kind of a foundation for being open, because when you're open, you're usually collaborating with others to create value. I'll come back to that, Liz. And actually value 12 is at regular intervals in agile, as it should be in open as well. Teams come together, they reflect, are we doing the right thing? Are we talking to the right customers? How well are we working, etc., etc. So as well as agile being very focused on, delivering for the customer, and always working towards that, there's also space in the ceremonies of agile to reflect on how well are we doing that. Could we do it better? Because everybody can be better. You can be better for the customer, and you can be better for yourself all the time. And that's the essence of agile. It is very different, as I said. This is difficult for organizations to go through because, pre-2000 we had this kind of, I call them organizations like machines. Do you know what I mean? There was this kind of hierarchical diplomacy that had to be followed. People were sat in their stovepipes in their domains, and everybody had to kind of wait to be told what to do in your little kind of track of life, and you did it, and you kind of told, and everything moved up and moved down in the organization. The whole idea of agile is that leaders empower teams, and in those teams comprise of the domains and the people with skills who are necessary in order to be able to solve a problem, develop software, and then self-reflect on how well they're working together. If I take those kind of three core values, and that requires the organization and the leaders of an organization to devolve direction, devolve responsibility, and because of that, the necessity for leaders to be purpose-led guiders, as opposed to mechanical KPI-led managers, is the big shift. And when you don't have that leadership in an organization where it's allowed to be an organism, in other words, kind of teams can spawn up, and it's kind of the project organization is another way to think about it. This idea of the right people in terms of business people, finance people, risk and reg people, product people, and then technical and data people. They come together, they form a little cell, they identify what problem needs to be solved, they go about solving it in software, they release it on an iterative basis, customer tells them if it's going right or going not, they redefine, reprioritize, and they go again. And there are many different applications of agile. I've read and seen lists, of kind of over 60 different methodologies and different styles. There's Scrum, and there's Kanban, and Scaled Agile, and SAFe frameworks, and so on and so forth. You can, go to town, and I have some of the slides, not in this one. I have a reference to where you can pick up all of those. But at the heart of it, kind of Scrum is kind of probably the most recognized that's out there. And it's this idea of taking down from the leaders the vision, the purpose of the organization, identifying, what slipstream you're in. So are we in the slipstream of, developing onboarding experiences or products, or could be back-end processes, et cetera, and that's your product area. And then the idea is that agile teams will identify all the things that they could do to improve life for their user, their customer. Which could be a colleague, by the way, but it's for their customer. And then in the sprint planning, they prioritize that, and they put those onto a prioritized backlog, and then they work in cycles of maybe 2, 3, or 4 weeks to in-code, develop solutions. They release that solution. They do a sprint review. How is that working for the customer? How well did we do? And then they, after they release the product, and they kind of go back to the start again. So it's an iterative cycle. And again, some detail on the slide down the bottom to kind of give you a little bit of sense of that. Now I'm getting a couple of questions in here, so I'll look at them. Experience, Garvin, how can we mend ITIL practices? So you might just help me on what ITIL practices are. So I'm just not clicking with the acronym here this evening.
Hi there, hi Garvin. So I can't remember, to be honest with you, what it stands for, but it's very much like service management, incident management, change management. Everything is like siloed in that way, and you'll have to go. It's kind of everything is policy driven per each section of it.
It's rules based. Rules based.
It's to comply with those. So. And majority, like I work for a bank, and majority of the financial services will probably have that kind of model, and it doesn't necessarily sit well with agile.
Thank you,
have
Mark. Information Technology Infrastructure Library. Brilliant. So, you know, that's process driven or rules driven. So typically how it is, like, I mean, you know, in a regulated entity, in large organizations, you're going to have loads of processes and you have to work by those processes. And, you know, maybe in your library, it tells you what to do and how to do it. Hello, Rachel's little man. We'll give him a little wave. And this might not really correlate, but let me give you a general answer that because it's a good question and it will apply to everybody. No organization will move from, you know, whatever way they work today to an agile way of working, nor should they completely and wholly and fully. They typically will start using agile as a means to manage their change priorities. And the kind of the fundamental difference is when we're looking to manage our change priorities, typically in the past, and again, the slides in this in the background, you know, you might have done through waterfall, you know, so you might have identified the problem, defined and scoped the solution, set out a budget, set out a project plan, and you kind of ruthlessly follow that. Maybe oversimplifying here, but the whole idea is, you know, that often that's the way change was managed. And the idea behind agile is you don't try and eat the elephant, you break the elephant up into little pieces, and what you try and do is iterate through change, learn as you're doing it, look to improve the outcome for the stakeholder, you know, the customer or the partner or the colleague, whoever it is, and also improve yourselves as a team. And you kind of go into this kind of continuous loop of improvement on short iterative cycles using software and applying the kind of the principles from earlier on. So in my experience, and I'm not sure who asked that question, Sibel, sorry, Sibel, it tends to happen more in the change component of kind of large operations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Don't know how to say. And it tends to be like most operations will continue to need to run, you know, on a kind of on a widget basis, you know, every day, process, right? But the idea of agile teams is they'll be, you know, different members of different teams will come together, work in agile formats, identify where improvements could be made, and work in pace and iteration to try and improve those. And again, it's about that kind of cross-functional teams coming together to do that. Michael, you had a question as well. Thank you, Mark, for that.
It's worth reminding the Agile Manifesto was originally written and conceived from an engineering perspective and software development. Agile is much more broader now and it's been applied by wider teams, HR teams, marketing teams, operations teams. And so it's very much about collaboration, experimentation, and it's not just about delivering pieces of the software. I put a link into a paper by Alistair Coburn. It's really good read.
Brilliant.
Heart of Agile, and he talks about Agile is all about collaborating, deliver, reflecting, and improving. And collaborating, you work with other people to achieve a result. Delivering value for your customers. Reflecting is looking back at how you've done. How could you identify ways we could work better? And then the improvement side of it, it's not about big improvements. He talks about concept of micro improvements.
Thank you, Michael.
All the time. And I guess a lot of what we do, or what I work with teams, is about driving home a message about experimentation and taking small bets and trying to look at new ways of working. So a lot of things, instead of kind of story points, tends to be synonymous with practices. That I try and drive my teams to use Monte Carlo simulations, to historical data to make improvements. Yeah, great shout outs, Michael. Thank you for adding your expertise and experience, and it's brilliant to hear that from the trenches. And I think that's why I always go back and say, look, you know, if you're going to start with Agile, there's loads of different practices, there's all different ceremonies. Really, the heart of it is kind of follow the principles and values, look to organize, just as you've described, Michael, and really a lot of what I'm trying to do in the rest of the material is just kind of give people a feel for what Agile is and how to think about stepping into it. And you're so right. I mean, you know, teams from all walks of life now are coming together, either in their own domains, you know, so it could be in a HR function, Michael, brilliant. And I've worked with organizations to do that. Or they could be, you know, in operational functions and they bring in the HR people or they bring in whoever, you know. And it's really this shift towards
identifying what problems are we trying to solve, how do we, bite off, small ways to solve for that with small teams who are empowered and who kind of follow those kind of values. So hopefully the materials that you'll read, folks, will bring it to life, and it's a brilliant article to share. Thank you, Michael, from Coburn. So what I might do is take that, and I might put it into the slides, Michael, afterwards, and just have that there for everybody to follow as well. So great share, lovely. Thank you very much for that. Okay, folks, 1942. Unless there's any other questions, I'm going to move on. So we've covered, this idea of there are, an opportunity when we're using digital to organize and self-directed teams to drive, rapid and iterative product development for the customer, for colleagues, for partners, etc. The importance of leadership, letting go, and therefore the importance of leaders as coaches, leaders as guides, and leaders who provide that ultimate vision. Now, Agile is a bedfellow of, yes, sorry, so somebody wanted to pop in there.
Sorry, it's Paulette. Just, sorry, I don't mean to bring you back to Agile, but
yeah,
I'm just a little unsure about the Agile side in terms of, do we need to still consider the as is in the traditional kind of waterfall sense when we're trying to innovate digital transformation via an Agile methodology? Does the as is come into play at all?
It does. Yeah,
no looking for pain points and things, but
yeah. Let me see if I'm on the right track. I'm conscious of time. I think if your organization is typically working in a waterfall way, in a more traditional project management approach where there's clarity and certainty and budget allocation and kind of everybody manages to a plan.
Yes.
Yeah. So where Agile comes in is often as experimentation. So Michael actually said it, and often what organizations will do is, they don't switch from waterfall to whatever Agile way they want to work into the future. What mostly happens is organizations go, oh my God, it takes a very long time. It takes too long. It's too costly. And we find out like halfway through the project that we just, we're getting it wrong. The sponsors are getting frustrated, or the market's just moving on. That's mostly, the kind of the pain that people would start experiencing. And what I've seen is organizations say, okay, well, how would we do it better? And I guess a lot of people look over to the Agile kind of way of thinking and working, and say, well, what if we tried to follow these practices and principles? What about if we didn't just try and do this 2-year thing? Why wouldn't we, if we broke this down into, maybe some of the smaller but perhaps more important things, if we just try to iterate through getting micro solutions, right? So micro fixes. But you won't move from one to the other overnight. And often what's happening is organizations might then spin up a separate team, and then, they might not touch what's attempted to be achieved in the larger kind of waterfall projects, but they might find other smaller projects and see if they can build an Agile way of working. And once they're mature and comfortable with that, because it's a different philosophy, it's a different style of management leadership, it's a different way of working for teams. When they've matured that, they might start then de-scoping larger projects and moving them more to Agile teams. And it generally happens in transition over time. Paulette, I hope I'm answering your question, and hopefully it's...
You are indeed, and it just, for me, I'm in healthcare, and it just seems the confusion is definitely there within healthcare and digital transformation. That's what this is sounding like, in that they looking to do a huge digital transformation, and perhaps an organization you're working with is trying to implement Agile methodology, but yet we're still working towards the old traditional ways of trying to change everything and fix everything at once instead of bite-size, developing that muscle. Okay, thank you. So sorry about that, but thank you so much.
No, it's brilliant. No, great question. Okay, no, thank you, Paulette. It's a great question to try and cover. I think, you know, it's one of the risks of digital transformation. Mostly they say 70% of them fail. We will be covering this again in one of our Saturdays, you know, and the reason is that we try and do too much, you know, too quickly with too much certainty, etc., etc. But the reality is lots of organizations are kind of, you know, used to doing things in more traditional ways. And to try and do everything a new way is just very hard for them. So it tends to happen more experimentally. It tends to go through a maturity path, and then there tends to be a glide over time. But that has to be a very considered and determined thing to do to get you into the 30% of success in digital transformations, because trying to do it the old way just doesn't work, in my experience anyway. And I've seen lots of cases and been involved in lots that have tried to do both. And I've been involved in agile work that's kind of failed, you know, gloriously. But in many ways, you have to fail at these things in order to figure them out. And my experience is there's not one agile way. You take the principles, you take the ceremonies, people tend to, you know, create their own. And actually when people create their own and they build their own pattern of working and their own pattern of thinking using those values and philosophies, that's when it tends to stick and that's when it tends to work. Therefore, that's when it tends to mature, and that helps to accelerate the glide, because there's typically always a glide, Paulette. So.
Yeah, no, I understand. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No, thank you. Okay, I'm going to pop on to innovation, the kind of the bedfellow, because innovation is often kind of steeped in and enabled by you know, agile ways of working. This idea of starting with the problem to be solved, the customer, and trying to, you know, gestate a new idea, a method, a service, or ultimately a product to solve for that. So I want to kind of just go into some of the kind of methodologies and practices of innovation. Is it a nice to have or a must to have? It's kind of a must to have. I think I would have shared with you a couple of weeks ago, this idea of corporate longevity is in a kind of long-term decline, which really means that companies are not around as much anymore. Why? Because often they're not able to innovate and keep pace with an ever increasing, changing world around them. So the necessity to innovate is greater today than ever was, because the world is moving faster and faster. Standing still is not an option. So innovation was once thought of as, you know, something we do on the side. It's, for me, in all the strategy work that I do, regardless of sector now or size or organization, you know, strategy equals innovation these days, because innovation is a means to get ahead, stay ahead, and extract value that's already in your organization, or you could identify and create in the world around you. And, you know, there's lots of, you know, McKinsey article there which just talks about, you know, the value of innovation through a crisis. Actually, you know, lots of organizations kind of have in the past, don't see it so much anymore, but they kind of, you know, when the crisis hits or the cost, you know, program hits and we've got to reduce costs, often organizations say, well, the first thing we'll do is we'll stop any innovation. It's, you know, it sounds counterintuitive. I'm kind of giggling a little bit as I say it, because that's probably the time when you need to innovate the most. Because innovation is about, you know, developing new ways in order to solve for customers. And if we're in crisis, the customer's probably in a crisis, so all the more reason to do it. And those that do it, as per the McKinsey articles, tend to kind of command tremendous rewards. You know, very traditional way of looking at it, but it's really, you know, does help to make sense. Is, you know, there's a McKinsey 3 Horizon model, and it talks about, when we think about innovating, we have got to think about it on kind of different horizons or different swim lanes. I'll show you some swim lanes in a second, which kind of bring this into a little bit more detail. But the kind of the horizons kind of often kind of visually make sense to people, and because innovation is not about the brand new. In fact, mostly innovation today is about the continued improvement and evolution of your core, what you already have in market. So it's about optimizing your existing products for your existing customers. And if you think about it, simplification, some of the stuff I talked to you about working in agile ways to make change faster in your core, is all about creating capacity to explore. And that's where we see adjacent innovation, where we see organizations looking to expand either into new markets or into new products. And it could be new products in new markets, so it can be both at the same time. And then, transformational innovation is this idea of, creating whole new markets all by themselves. So if we take insurance, I'm just doing this top of head, right? And so most insurers in their processes and then their propositions should be looking at allocating resources to optimizing their existing, policies and their existing experiences and the cover that they provide, probably at an allocation rate of 70%. They typically will expect their return on investment to be very low from that, probably 10% or sub 10%. But one thing that's not on that is there should be another bar around the confidence level. And typically they're going to be 70% confident of getting a 10% return from the 70% of resources that they allocate. That insurer may decide to go into a new product area. So we have somebody there from the health business. So somebody in the health business, insurance for that may say, well, we want to go into the pet business. So we won't insure humans, we'll insure animals. It sounds the same, but it's different, very different. So that's what we might think of as adjacent innovation. That insurer at the same time may say, well, we need to think about transformational innovation. And what they may wish to start doing is understanding maybe what's happening in mobility. And they may start to innovate pay-as-you-go insurance on the basis that we'll all be in a non-owned environment and we'll be in the sharing economy at some time in the very near future. And as per the Audi example that I showed you a couple of Saturdays ago, we might need to not insure assets, i.e. people or cars. We might need to insure the amount of time that we consume services such as mobility. Which again is a very different sphere. There's a really nice article from from Deloitte. It's referred to on the right-hand side, which kind of talks to the same kind of theories that I'm talking about, and it kind of maybe shows what different parts of an organization might be involved in those different transformational under those traditional spaces or under those headings. Again, just so I can say to you folks, if you have your mic on, just to keep it off for the quality for everybody. But here's my take on this. You can't, oftentimes what happens is, organizations falsely believe that they've got to innovate in the core first and then win there. And then they've got to go and do some adjacent innovation and win there. And then go off and do some transformational innovation and go off and win over there, as if it's a sequence. It's not. It needs to run in parallel. Organizations are setting up their strategies so that they can sweat the core today through simplification, release efficiencies, so that they can look at adjacencies and advancements and new territories at the same time as also having a portfolio of experiments that are looking at transformational spaces. So that could be in fractional insurance, it could be in pay-as-you-go, it could be in all that kind of spaces. And every industry has its own territories and spaces that they believe are transformational. Why? Because the future is today, and people are trying to invent for the future that's coming and that's emerging today. And again, on the transformational, it's probably only a very small proportion, maybe 10%. Of resources, even less, that could be allocated to that. The return on investment, if they hit a vein, is probably quite high. So again, showing the inverse of maybe there's a 70% kind of return or a 7x return on investment, but the probability is probably back down at 10%. So there's very low probabilities of getting very high returns, but there only should be a small amount of resources allocated against it. But it's the idea of multimodalism. And when we spend our Saturday on execution, we're going to talk about how to build multimodal roadmaps, which will talk about, we need to exploit the business that we have today. So that's that kind of sustaining innovation, that Horizon 1. So that's all about cost and profit and sweating the core assets. Yeah, organizations need to think about, at the same time, extending their business. So diversifying, finding, new territories to grow in. What's the next proposition? What are Gen X doing? What are Gen Y doing? What are millennials doing? What are the next generation doing? and how do we build for them? And at the same time, disruptive innovation is in the exploratory space, which is where you're experimenting, you're learning, and through a kind of portfolio, you narrow in and find yourself building the business model of tomorrow. And really, you know, innovation does come down to being a strategic endeavor in today's world, and necessitates organizations running these three kind of streams in parallel, often with interchange between them, because often what's happening in exploration moves into extending and ultimately becomes the business that needs to be continuously exploited. So it tends to be quite virtuous. Organizations do this well, you know, do segregate, but also connect the dots between them. Now, the segregation is important because, as I've kind of articulated down the bottom of this slide, you know, when we're sustaining innovation in that core, you know, the problem's well, it's understood, it's an existing market, you know, that surety is there, and, you know, there's a predictability, and there's a certain mindset that goes with that. When we go over to disruptive innovation, it's hard to ask somebody to come in the morning and sustain, and then ask them, you know, for an hour at lunchtime to be disruptive, and then go back to sustaining at 2 o'clock. It requires a different way of working, a different way of thinking, and kind of really a different flow of teams and so on, of being, as indeed does developmental innovation as well. So often they're segregated as activities, and back to my, you know, what we were talking about with Paulette, this idea of, you know, we might have a lot of waterfall stuff going on in, you know, in core operationals, you know, where we need certainty and so on, and we might develop agile teams to do some developmental innovation, or to do some sustaining innovation, and indeed also have agile teams working in disruptive information, and ultimately, you know, you're developing sprint teams who are doing all of these things that ultimately surround a core BAU team. Rachel, I see you have your hand up, so I want to make sure I find time to get to you.
Thank you, and apologies to everyone. This might not have any relevance for anyone else. I'm not sure, am I getting a little confused here? Like, when you talk about the McKinsey 3 horizons and all of that, like, is that connected to, and now I'm only asking in case I'm going off track, the McKinsey 7S framework, where you look at the structure, the systems, the strategy,
great question.
style, SAP. So am I right? And just before you answer, because I'm not sure, am I getting a little sidelined and going too into strategy?
No,
or am I actually on the right track where I'm considering from a digital transformation point of view those elements, or am I gone wrong?
No, I think it's a really good question. It's the danger of too many frameworks. We might have frameworkitis, Rachel, and I'm guilty of that. So let me help you to sense make on that one. And you were kind of just linking to my points. You know, when we're in sustaining innovation, we might need to organize ourselves and set ourselves up different than in developmental innovation and in disruptive innovation. The 7 S's are a means to evaluate how you set yourself up to do something. So therefore, you could look at a 7S for each one of those 3, and that would help you, you know, your structure, your style, your system, your skills. I forget all the S's, so forgive me. But there was 4 of them. Remember I told you about 7 S's, folks, the storytelling. You can remember 5 things really easy, 7 you struggle, but the 7 is the outer limit. So Rachel, I'm not sure if that makes sense to you. Really good question though.
Yeah, it does, but and I know you can like get bogged down in frameworks and that, but is it okay, like, let's say if you're in the middle of it, like we're looking at what assets we have, we're looking at the operations, but your asks and your operational model can actually change at any point in the digital transformation. So it like, I suppose maybe I'm not wording it correctly. Like, do you sometimes have to go back and take the step back where your frameworks and models during operations become invalidated, that you have to go back to the, I suppose, the construction, the creation model.
Yeah. I think I follow you, and the answer in my understanding would be yes. So as your, I mean, digital like transformation, the reason why they call it transformation is it's a whole lot of change all at the same time. That's what transformation is. Like, it's a fundamental change. It's monstrous. So it's not change. Don't call it change. Call it transformation, right? So therefore, and transformation is also this idea of perpetual and evolution, right? So it's going to, this idea that we, as we're digitalizing, as we're moving to become customer centric, to be efficient, to find new ways to get to market through engagement, apply data analytics. That's why you're working in an agile way, which allows for that more mobility, fluidity within the organization. That's why we talk about the importance of innovation. And if you're doing all those things, your organization is going to be changing all the time. Because the processes, your products, your propositions, everything's changing, and that's why it's transformative. And therefore, if I think I'm answering your question, right, Rachel, you have to work on the assumption that your organization is perpetually evolving. So you're always going back to go forward. You're always evolving your operating model, because as you change, your operating model needs to change in tandem, or as you look to change, you need to change your operating model in order to enable the change. So both will be happening simultaneously. Because what you're doing is changing your organization, and you need to change your organization to do things differently in order to, so you almost have an infinity loop, Rachel, if that's making sense. So hopefully I'm answering your question. Yeah, that's okay. Brilliant stuff. Okay, let's keep going. So in the whole idea of really just wanted to, when we think about, and Rachel's probe there brings it to life, this idea of, you can use the 7 S's to look at it, but this whole idea of you probably need to develop different skills, capabilities, tools, models, etc., in each of these kind of tram lanes of innovation. And I've just given you kind of a sense of them. So, when you're in sustaining, it's your existing business, or you're dependent on the insights, you're probably applying lean practices. Agile becomes really important, as we talked about earlier, to start perpetuating continuous change. When you're in developmental, you're building on that, but you're probably more doing design thinking. So you're starting to, like we touched on in the customer, you're starting to understand your persona, do value proposition maps. You're starting to live with them, really understand them. Perhaps you're trying to crowdsource, and perhaps you're like really lifting entrepreneurs out of your business. We'll get to entrepreneurs later. And then when you're in disruptive, like you're really into kind of really understanding deep ethnography, what's happening in the market, what's happening in social structures. You're using radars, you're using scouts, and you're probably working with open partners as well. So you're doing, and you won't be working with open partners necessarily in sustaining innovation, but the dots have to be connected. So there's a thread that kind of runs through all of this, because normally when you have a portfolio of innovation, what you might see when you're in your radars, or what you might see when you're identifying what's coming down the line, is identifying an opportunity to solve for something that's happening in the sustaining field. And that's AI today. Actually, most of the traction that organizations are having is about their experimentation teams and their innovation teams are learning very quickly how to adopt Gen AI, build product from it, and they're actually sticking it into solving for stuff in the core. And that's where the real value is. And that's back up into this kind of 10-70% kind of allocation of resources. And it's about, trying to bring innovation closer to the core. So I think that's something that's definitely happening today. Conscious of time, want to get you all off for 8:30. So there'll be other slides in here that just you can talk through them and look through them later on, which talk to, the double diamond, just another methodology of innovation. I put in a slide which you can just read and go through around how to apply design thinking. And design thinking is really about starting with your users, determining the problems or opportunities that they have, identifying solutions, simulating user experiences, and then validating them. And if you think about agile, it's exactly agile, focused on on solving for users, and those users could be customers, could be partners, and could be colleagues. So it's the same kind of stuff. So there's kind of this way I call them bedfellows. And in the back here, you can just read about, if you were setting up a 5-day sprint for design thinking, what it looked like. And then I have popped in some other slides that you'll get to see them later on just different tools that you can use, Blue Ocean strategies, Dublin's 10 types of innovation, and I've popped in even an innovation canvas that you can go and use, all for you to read afterwards. What's really important is understanding where you are. And I've put in an innovation maturity assessment with a kind of like, nearly a dozen questions for you to have a think about where are you and your organization on your innovation maturity assessment. This is probably, not probably, this will be, I would suggest, the framework that you should use in your assignment to kind of validate or evaluate and then validate where you are and what you believe needs to be done. So it's kind of like a mini evaluation of where you are in your innovation journey. And then if you're thinking about innovation journey, there's typically a maturity path, as there is with every era of growth and type of growth. Normally organizations, start to expose themselves to thinking about innovating in a different way, and they become aware of the need to innovate, and they start to get curious and willing, and they start to explore, and ultimately they'll move to an education phase and ultimately into experimentation, where they're actually setting up teams to kind of innovate in the core, in adjacent, or in disruptive spaces. And then they start to scale that, and it starts to become adopted. And again, agile tends to be the core way of thinking and acting within the innovation agenda. And then obviously everybody is trying to track for mastery, as we and you and I and always are. And then behind that, I've kind of given a good cheat sheet in terms of, for those sequence and stages, what needs to be done around vision and team and funding and tools and business engagement and partnerships. So hopefully you will find that useful to have a read of now that I've kind of shared with you the essence of how we go along. And I have a couple of other slides in there. You can read them yourselves, but I've also put in the kind of the pitfalls and surprises. Sponsorship is critical. Business acumen and empathy. Innovators really need to move into that customer centric. What's the job that the user is trying to do. Diverse teams really critical. Homogeneity is the enemy. So when you're setting up innovation agendas and design thinking agendas, it's to make sure that we've got all the walks of life working and thinking and acting and so on, and indeed starting to embed partners to augment that diversity is pretty critical as well. And the final piece, I'll come to you now, Rachel, is just about having the right kind of philosophy around risk, because working in agile, innovative ways necessitates you to have typically a different risk mentality. And what I mean by that is I'm back to my resources allocation, expectation of return, and probability of success. Because when you talk to leaders about there's probably only 10% chance of success, lots of people kind of struggle with that, and it is a different risk philosophy and a different leadership mandate. Rachel, sorry, just checking back in with you.
Yeah, not too bad, and apologies. I know I've interrupted a few times, but I just want to get my head right on it. Like when you say about like you just went past the blue ocean slide, but like if you're in a red ocean, you could potentially outplay that scenario if you approached your assets and operations correctly for digital transformation, never mind becoming like a new innovator and creating your own blue ocean. You could actually navigate red ocean by correctly managing it in digital transformation. Am I right?
You're right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the idea of exploring and exploiting and disrupting all at the same time, Rachel. So you couldn't be best in your core, and you should attempt to be best in your core first and foremost. That's a kind of a first principle, absolutely, without doubt. But you can't expect that your core is going to last forever. It's probably going to live for a shorter period of time as we move into greater eras of change. So I think it's about getting that that piece right. Right. Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Good questions, everybody. How's everybody doing? 2012. Conscious of time now to get you off in 18 minutes. Shall we go into to open for a couple of minutes and explore that one? Okay. So the essence here is partnering. It's really simple. And this shift away from proprietary businesses to partnering in business is not a new thing. It's been around for ages, right? But there's two things that have driven this movement. Again, I'm simplifying. There's two kind of fundamental things that have driven this drive towards, or kind of glide towards partnering. So the first one is the opportunity to innovate, and the necessity to innovate. So it's kind of the opportunity and necessity for innovation. Why? Because when we've seen the emergence of platforms, and we've seen the emergence of digital pioneers, starting with the customer and working back, it started just to shape new expectations in the world, and we've covered lots of that. So that begets the necessity for innovation. And often when organizations are seeking innovation or seeking to innovate, they find that they have been in a proprietary business model, and yet they see that there's a new realm of expectations or competitiveness. And they often lean over and say, if we're going to keep pace, we've got to partner, because we can't expect the existing organization and folks within it to move quickly. So partnership enables agility, augmentation, and ultimately velocity, because of innovation. And kind of underpinning that, I've kind of mentioned the second one, but it's the danger of, without partnering, that the brakes go on and you get anchored in the today, while wishing you were in a tomorrow. And for speed of change and for speed of transformation, there's a necessity to partner. So there's lots of different ways to partner. On the left-hand side, I've kind of got the different type of archetypes, and I've kind of on the both scales, you've got this idea in the bottom left is kind of proprietary. So if your business model is all about, you want to take all the value, and then if you want to develop a proposition to take all the value, well, then you sit in the bottom left and you're a solo organization. So you don't partner, you do it all yourself. But because of these drivers for innovation, for new experiences, and because of the necessity to speed up, lots of organizations partner with other people, but they do it in different ways. So sometimes they do it through collaboration, where they're looking to share the value in the business, or through franchises, or through distribution or brokers, and sometimes the joint ventures. And sometimes organizations they see the opportunity to, or they're forced to actually engage with multi-sided platforms or ecosystems, which is where they become one contributor to an ecosystem of partners on a platform that supply many folks. And over on the right-hand side, for the different types of partnerships, I've just tried to give you some examples as you're over there. Michael, I know you had your hand up, so I'm going to check in with you.
I guess I can see how the partnering works from a private sector perspective. How does this work from a public sector, or say in my own case, a regulating entity?
Yeah, good question. Brilliant question, right? So can I bring you onto this one, Michael? This is going to the next slide. I was going to take it, because you'll end up partnering in different ways depending on what you're trying to do. And I've kind of broken it down here on the left-hand side, because the partnering is kind of the where to play, But let's, sorry, it's the how to play. So let's come back to the where to play. So, and I'll answer your question. Let me do this kind of model, and then I'll answer specifically, Michael. So typically, again, to simplify it and help us to see this, you know, there's normally two ways, or there's two jobs that people are trying to do when they partner. It's perhaps to enhance their proposition, or it's to enhance their operational capability in order to enhance their proposition, or extract value out of delivering their proposition. So you've kind of got the y-axis. So you've kind of got this idea of, we're going to partner in order to meet the needs of that market, that innovation need that I've mentioned, or we're going to partner in order to create efficiency and speed, or augment our capability, which might be to reduce our costs or just help us keep pace, or it might also be, you know, enhancing our operations in order to deliver that better proposition. And then, of course, it's never just as simple as kind of one axis. I've kind of created the second one, which is the X one, which is, you know, sometimes organizations are partnering to enhance their existing proposition or enhance existing capability. And sometimes, and particularly when we think about multi-sided platforms and the opportunity to play in other people's territories, you're partnering so that you can extend your proposition into another partner's environment or into a platform's environment. Or you could be extending your capability because you may have built a core competency, and what you want to do then is basically sell that core competency as a service for other people to partner upon. And the kind of, if you think about it, I don't know if you can see my mouse here, you extend your capability in order for other people to enhance their capability. And if you think of Amazon Web Services created its technology, its cloud services, because they didn't see that anybody else was doing it fast enough and as good as they wanted to. So they built their own core competency, and then they ended up selling it as a service. So that's what the extended capability is. And typically people will partner in different ways to achieve different things that they're trying to do on that 2x2 matrix. But that tends to be the very essence of the necessity for partnering. And then, Michael, to answer your question, you will find a lot of the time that the public service will enhance their capability. So, you know, software as a service, or you'll be trying to augment maybe, you know, and from Barry Lowry and the team, like, you know, I'm working with them at the moment through a thing called Emerald, which is digital identity. So, you know, they look to bring in, you know, so for instance, the government brought in Nearform to develop the app, which was the COVID app, and they might bring in similar partners like that to build a digital identity wallet. But they may not just build that digital identity wallet as a core capability. They might be involved in building a digital identity wallet in order to expose the government's identity kind of credentials that they have, your PPS number, etc. But that might get held in an ecosystem wallet, along with information that you might get from an insurance company, you might get from a bank, or you might get from a health service provider, or you might get from anywhere actually that holds a credential about you. But it tends to be a lot of the utilities. So it could be electricity service, it could be whatever it's going to be. So typically you find, Michael, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question now, but typically you find it's more enhanced capability. But then there are sometimes ventures that the government will participate in, which kind of moves above the line into helping and playing a part in providing propositions for society. So hopefully that brings, Michael, brings that to life for you.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
And then, you know, so from different examples, I mean, you know, come back to Ryanair is, you know, Ryanair's created an ecosystem for travel, and it partners with different players in order to achieve different strategic outcomes or different things on those crosshairs. So for instance, you know, on flights, like it's Ryanair, right? But you could say that they partner with Boeing or Airbus or wherever it is on their transport. They don't really. I mean, they buy a product, so they don't really partner. But their proprietary services obviously is flights. But when it comes to people booking cars, they have a kind of a distribution agreement with Car Trawler, and then beyond that, for rental cars, they broker for Avis and Hertz and so on and so forth. So in order for them to create this ecosystem of travel services, they partner in different ways. They have a joint venture with the Maltese government for Air Malta, and they're present on all the multi-site platforms, selling their wares and creating awareness and so on and so forth. And then they have some joint collaborations with people like hotels.com on room booking. So again, they partner in different ways, but all in the pursuit of creating an ecosystem of travel services. And their shift has been away from getting people from A to B to helping people to travel. So and the kind of the schema on the right is kind of giving you an idea. Again, they've done some financial services stuff. They've rolled back from that over the years, I think. But again, car insurance links to car hire, etc., etc., etc. And again, they're partnering with different people to do different things. So there are some other slides that are in here. You can read them later on around how Amazon are a multi-sided platform, and they really are quite proprietary. But they present themselves as a platform in the market to put buyers and sellers together. They have some joint ventures, particularly in the financial services space, with Chase Manhattan for an American Express, for instance, and their distributors for cards in that regard. But again, they tend to cycle through those. And back to Rachel's piece earlier on, their strategy and their operating model is changing all the time. So they've actually started to go proprietary now and build their own financial services capability. And they've been buying up some firms that help them do that over the years. And again, you can look in at other people, just other kind of multi-sided platforms, Airbnb. And indeed, if you think about the ultimate ecosystem, it's the health ecosystem, but we shall not try and unpack that this evening. What is important is when one is thinking about partnering for enhanced proposition or capability, either in your existing business or exploring into new territories, you need to prepare for it and prepare your operating model, because you have to think about your proprietary existing propositions need to sit side by side with propositions from new parties, and perhaps you're going to, with your new partner or just yourself, you're going to present those propositions into a new ecosystem. So for instance, on Amazon or on eBay or whatever it is, and that requires you to think about your operating model differently, as indeed and there's the layers, around proposition and distribution, and then around partnerships and platforms, around manufacturing, and around operations, and right down to technology. And of course, your commercial model changes because you're in a sharing model. So constructing that is pretty critical. So last slide I'm going to show you is one I'm going to suggest, because it's 2025 and I just want to cover assignment before we go. This is one for you to read later on, and please do read it. This is the kind of the score sheet for where and how to play. Because people tend to say, well, Jesus, where do we start and stop with that, Garvin? Well, you typically start and stop with an analysis sheet that looks like this, which is, in order for you to know where you should partner and how you should partner, you need to think about why. And the dimensions on the left are either strategic or structural dimensions, which says to yourself, are you partnering because you want to go on the offense, so you want to move into a new territory and therefore you believe that a partnership is going to help you to do that? Or are you going to partner for defense because you're worried about a competitive threat? And as you think through that question, that leads you down through understanding why you're partnering, which should lead you to understanding how to partner, because the why and the how are inextricably linked. And I've given some sample considerations and would suggest to you, and this is not exhaustive, but it's showing you the kind of decision-making tool that I and others would use when we're working with in the world, or working with partners, clients, or organizations, or boards, or whatever, to say, well, what is our open strategy and how should we partner? and there are strategic considerations, and then there are also structural considerations, e.g. are you going to have a one-to-one partner, are you going to participate in a platform, is it only a few partners you have, or is it going to be anybody and everybody you have? All different reasons for doing these things. Now, Jamie, I'll go to you quickly for a question before we close. How are you?
Garvin, how are you doing? Apologies, my video isn't working, but I'll be very quick. Would it be fair to say most mainstream financial institutions, the kind of partnership joint venture is probably about as gutsy as they get, unlike like Ryanair, where you're saying the multilateral platforms, most mainstream banks particularly aren't really interested in getting into that space. I suppose I'm specifically asking with a view to the assessment. It's not that you'd be ignoring the multilateral platforms, but you just wouldn't see it perhaps as a fit for a lot of mainstream financial institutions, because it's just not, as I said, joint venture is, from my perspective, joint venture is probably about as gutsy as they go.
Yeah, you do find
sense.
that. Yeah, well, but a lot of yes and no. So I think from depends on whether you look from an Irish view or a world view. And I think if you look from an Irish view, probably yes. I think if I say to you and look from a world view, I don't know if you remember, I was given the example of KBC and others when we were looking at the Deloitte digital banking maturity, and we showed that those digital leaders, 40 or 50% of them now are offering open services. So that idea of integrating payments into car parking, bike rental, all those kind of things, that's partnering. That's open. So I think yes, from an Irish view, but I don't think that's the world view. Does that make?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just, as I said, it was just with a view to the assessment one. If you're focused on an Irish institution, it probably just doesn't seem in their wheelhouse. But I take your point. If you look internationally,
and I think and I probably wouldn't grasp the full kind of what you were thinking through. I think that's the as is. So what I'd be suggesting to you is, as you think about this exercise in your strategy, have a think about what should be or what could be.
Advocating for.
Because that's what this should be doing. Just about saying to you, so is there some defense or offense? So should we do? And are we partnering for innovation or efficiency? That's the top or the bottom of the grid that I showed you earlier on. Is it to serve a need, or is it to create a new one? And so your innovation, your agile agenda, these are all kind of in here as well in the kind of the background. So but I would
just
sorry.
an observation, Jamie, as much for you, Garvin, is probably. If you can see into what your organization's third-party risk management inventory is, it might give you insights into how many partnerships you actually do have that maybe you're not aware of. Because you'd be surprised, it may well be just that it's in a facet of a technology delivery or otherwise that maybe you're not aware of. But I do feel that we're over on the left side in terms of let's call it partnership strategy, and it's probably more just almost like a legacy. We've acquired this kind of partnership as opposed to anything more strategic, at least from an Irish bank's perspective.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
Think maybe broader as to where you might see those partnerships going on. But to Garvin's point, it's probably to indicate that we're over on the left side, foundational, not best in class.
Yeah,
cheers, folks.
I think that's right, Mark. I think if you look into all the Irish banks, I mean, the amount of partnering they're doing to enhance their capability is increasing at a rate of knots, right? And so is the world. When you think of SaaS platforms and PaaS and IaaS and so on and so forth, so that's all partnering for capability, and it tends to happen on the bottom left, move to the top right, and then bottom left and then move to the top left, and then when prowess is developed and partnering, it tends to move right on the grid to the left, if that makes sense. Two grids. Problem of having two grids in the one slide. So I think, Mark, you're right. You would be surprised if you went in and seen how many partners you're enhancing capability with. It's less on enhancing proposition, and it tends to see maturity on the left-hand side of the where to play grid before you see prowess and experimentation and ultimately value building over on the right-hand side. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Are we okay to keep going? Can I cover out on because I'm conscious it's 2031. I'm just slipped a little bit on time. If you're okay, if you need to head off. I know lots of you have your timing and so on. This will be recorded so you can pick it up again. But just for 2 minutes, I did update this slide and shared it with your in your portal. It's in the pack here as well this evening, just to see if I can more clearly articulate what is the minimum requirement for assignment 1. And there's 2 minimum requirements for assignment 1: one single slide and one 1,000 word memo. That's it. That's all I need. Right? That's the minimum requirement. It's up to you on how far beyond that you want to go. And again, I'll give you some guidance on that for a second. But basically what I need you to do is, number 1, evaluate. So create your slide. That's the first thing I'd ask you to do. So it's that slide that's down at the bottom. You'll have the slide in PowerPoint template. It's already uploaded in in IOB Learn. And I would ask you to use it to plot qualitatively. If you can get quantitative data, brilliant, but just even qualitatively plot where your organization is today and where do you think your organization needs to be in terms of its maturity to execute a strategy that you wish to pursue. And by doing the where are we today, where do we need to be, you're exposing the gap, okay? And then what I want you to do over on the right hand side of the chart is what's your conclusion on the gaps, or what are the gaps, and what is your gap closure recommendation? What should you do to close those gaps? Okay, so that's it. That actually is the fundamental of assignment 1. There are 7: customer, efficiency, engagement, analytics. Where are you today? Where do you think you need to be? What is the gap and how do you close the gap? Capture that in the slide. That's the minimum requirement. And then you'll have the slide, which ultimately that's going to be your appendix to a memo that you're going to write in 1,000 words to articulate an executive summary that sets out the conclusions of your analysis and the recommendations as if you were writing to the board. So it's an executive summary to an executive audience, concluding on your analysis and putting forward your case for transformation. So that's the minimum that we require. Mark, how you doing? You okay?
Yeah. Sorry,
got you now.
Like my power went off. I'm conscious. Obviously, there's let's call it the citing of resources or otherwise. If I have to have my organization's like a strategic plan, I would do that. We have to substantiate what I'm giving a critique on.
Mark, I was struggling to hear you a little bit. My Zoom audio just seems to be a little bit funny. You wouldn't run that by me again. Sorry.
It may be because I'm after switching my laptop and the power is now on battery.
No, you're okay.
So I'll say it again. So if I have to go and substantiate what I have, do I need to give you the strategic plan that my organization has, for example, or are you just happy to take it that I've evaluated it in some way?
It'll be better. If you can, the more you can share with me, the better it will be for me to see the rationale and the thread in your story. So it's got to be set against a strategy, of course. So that's because that's where you want to be. But you don't need to show me the strategy of the organization that you're with, Mark. You can just make reference to on customer centricity, we're scoring at 3 today for the following reasons. We believe that we need to be a 7 because the expectations of the market and our strategy, presents that we're going to be the most customer centric, organization on the planet.
Yeah,
right? If you just
that was sort of my thinking, but it was just how do you know I'm not just spoofing it? But again, I suppose that's where you've said you can use like a hypothetical customer, or hypothetical organization. So it's more have I got a coherent perspective on
be rational.
Yeah, we say we want to be customer centric, but we haven't substantiated. We don't have a customer a strategy, for example. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly. And for those students who, that's a great question, Mark, thank you. For those students who usually, are in the space of I'm going for a distinction, typically the first thing that they might present in their deck is, here's the strategy. And then the second thing that they might present is, and here's our assessment, my assessment of our capability today and what it needs to be in order to achieve that strategy. So that's often what it has to be. But I'm not making it compulsory, but that's often what you'll find. And then what they'll do is that might be slide 1 might be the strategy, slide 2 might be their assessment, and then slide 3 might be a walkthrough of, a double click down on, how fit or not the organization is on segmentation and ethnography when it comes to customer, understanding the customer, how poor or not the organization is on continuous improvement and planning and prioritization. So that's the double click you can go to. It's not necessary. I do encourage it, as I've said to you before, because that just means that you're using the material, applying to your organization, and evaluating it subjectively or qualitatively, and perhaps qualitatively as well. Some people have come and they've done kind of deep research and they've kind of done 100-person interviews on this kind of stuff. It's not necessary. It'll be lauded and you'll knock it out of the park from a scoring perspective.
That's a good point to make, because I do have access to the right people in terms of the strategy side of things, as who actually formulate the strategy. And I can say, well, I don't see in the strategic plan anything about an actual customer strategy or a technology strategy. Does it exist and it's just as a separate document? Or do I just, this would be my thinking. And I think you've sort of answered my question. Is I think I just take it, I've got something, and then give an evaluation based on what I see, as opposed to trying to gather something that may have to be created for it. And I don't think that's like a fair reflection of the organization.
Well, no, it's a great question. Great question and great bit of positioning. So two things I would say that are important. One is, your strategy for your organization is probably quite, carefully, managed, and therefore you may not be happy, and your organization may not be happy sharing it. And please don't, if that's the case. Equally,
that was my original reason as to ask it. I've checked it out with the CRO, and she's happy enough for me to go with the flow on this, but she wants me to if there's anything that's market sensitive and she's leaving that in my judgment. So I think I will. Work within those confines. So
I think you should work within those kind of those boundaries. Equally, I would give you comfort and say is I am the only one that reviews it, and I'm very tightly contracted and obligated in relation to confidentiality in regards to this. And look, I live and act, and I'm a player in the marketplace, so I treat that accordingly. And even to how all the material is collected and presented and how I market it, score, it's all in secure environments, etc., etc. So I think that confidentiality piece is important. The second thing, is for time and effort, you may not have the space and the capacity to create a deep kind of document. But if you show that you've done the thinking, that you've seen your strategy, you understand what your strategy needs versus what you have today, therefore you've identified gaps, and therefore you're saying, I believe we should do the following 1, 2, or 3 things. That's what we're trying to see. And why are we trying to see that? Because we're hoping you've learned by doing that, and therefore that kind of closes the loop on the learning design.
And maybe just a final, I suppose, question is, in doing what I want to do, and you said let's say where we want to be, and over on the right hand side of those capabilities, is it my perspective on what I see to be over on the right hand side? Is it like the perfect organization, or is it to more reflect what you have got in terms of the content and where I see we could be bringing this to?
Yeah, great question. Your interpretation, Mark, not mine. I mean, I'm giving you I'm giving you the full kind of Monty, the kind of, I'm giving you the full palette of colors, if you know what I mean. It's like getting a paint box. So I'm giving you the paint box. It's up to you to decide what size, what color, what substance, so that's entirely on your side. So assessment, your interrogation, your conclusions are entirely yours. I can only mark it as best you present it back. So your coherence and your that strain and that thread of thought is really important. But it's not my view; it's your view. 100% your view.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah, Mark. Thank you. Great input. Okay, Malgorzata. Hi, I think you were next.
Hi, Garvan. I have just a quick question. So beside the assignments, would we have actually an exam at the end of the module?
No,
No.
just
Okay.
two assignments. Just
okay.
2 assignments. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just
Thank
two
you very
assignments.
much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to say this, you only get 30% for this assignment.
And 70 for the next.
And 70 for the next one.
Yeah, but
you've probably done 50% of the work. You've probably done 50% of the work by doing this one.
But let's hope for 30 for this one and 70. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah. No, but you probably do get you're probably doing 50% of the effort. So the minimum requirement is 1 slide and 1 memo, as I covered at the beginning. But I'm giving you in the pack that I've given you. I'm suggesting to you. You don't have to use them, but my suggestion is there are 7 frameworks. I've given you 3 of them tonight, and I'm saying you might use those to kind of double click on the capability to give yourself some substance. Sometimes people use the framework, sometimes people don't. It doesn't matter. Don't worry, I won't be upset or otherwise. It's there for your resource, but sometimes people will find it, as I've said, on efficiency. Sometimes people score themselves on the 10 dimensions, on the 5 front and the 5 back, in terms of, what they believe the opportunity is to create capacity. And the only reason I share those is to kind of point you in the direction of what might be the most relevant kind of double clicks in order to help, go deeper on the assessment. And again, to make the point, some people, will just double down on customer centricity, and we'll go to town on that one and kind of ignore the others because they say we've got to get that one right first, and we're just going to focus on that. Some people are kind of saying we're really good on customer centricity, but we actually haven't thought of how to be open and to partner, so they double down on that one. Some people will have 2 of them, some people will have 3, some people will have the full 7. That's at your discretion again. So it's you have to think through what are the right ones and the right level at which you want to evaluate the capabilities. And only you can decide that, because only you know your strategy, only you're going to start doing the evaluation, and only you can decide what you believe is the most important thing to do. The most important thing for you to do in this assignment is actually do what you believe you and your organization should be doing. That's where the maximum learning comes. If I can see that, I don't negative mark, I'm only trying to positive mark you up. So the more you do and the more specific to your strategy you make it, the better the story will be, the better your learning will be, and the better then your overall mark, and ultimately the outcome of attending will be. Okay, does that make sense?
Just one question there, if
Yes.
that's okay.
Yes.
So it's just, and apologies, I can't turn on my camera. I must have camera issues. So just on the likes of the slides, and I know you were saying that we don't have to follow the exact slides, but if we were to use them, so just looking at the customer centricity, again, I'm just getting caught in the fact, are we doing the to be or the as is, or both? I suppose trying to get that point across of where we're at and then what we
Both.
need to be.
Yeah, no, great question. So you'd be doing both. So let's say you took customer, and let's say you took segmentation and persona mapping. You, by the nature of asking that question, you're going to be asking the question, what do we do today, and is that enough for what we need to be doing tomorrow, and therefore is there a gap? And that's the simple conversation you're having with yourself, if that makes sense.
Yep, I suppose how do we show that to you is what I'm more struggling with, I suppose, using the things.
Yeah, and some people will use this slide and just write it in here and just do a description, right? Some people will create a version of this based on 6 vectors like that, or some people will have an existing customer experience strategy. They might include that, and they might just make some commentary and show, you know, where they have been, where they are, where they're trying to get to, which just correlates back to illustrating that you've consumed, understood, and you're applying the material in the program. So that's entirely up to you. And I can't guide you on that because, again, you know, level 9 program, etc., that's up to you to figure if that's okay. Sorry, and I'm not trying to be awkward, but then the other side of things,
No.
yeah, so your style will differ, your content, yeah. So use your own, express yourself. It would be my encouragement in whatever way. Slides are there for you to use if you wish to, but if you have another way of expressing it, please do.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry if I skipped anyone in.
Not at all. So I can't see who was next in the queue. Niraja, was it you and then Katie? Or was it your... Yeah.
I think it's me. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Sorry, Katie, I saw you raised your hand after me, so that's how I thought. You can go ahead if you like. I'm okay.
I'll ask after you.
Okay, thank you. A quick question, Gavin. So, you know, the references that we need to make with all the material.
Yeah.
So, like in my previous assignments, like in my previous level 9, like there used to be a slide, like if we are making a slide or a presentation, there should be a references slide as well. It is a mandatory.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're referencing, it's the HBR reference guide.
Yeah.
And again, I think we're open on, you can do it on the slide, or you can have a reference slide at the end. Both are very acceptable.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Not going to constrict you in relation to that, but do reference if you can, and it's obviously it obviously supports your assignment. Yeah, but great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie.
Hi. This might seem like a bit of a ridiculous question, but I'm quite new to my organization and don't necessarily know how to go about finding the right people or finding these strategy documents. And I'm just struggling with kind of how to start, because I know you said we could use like a mock example or not necessarily our own organization.
Yeah.
But I suppose I'm just looking for some advice on where to kind of begin if you're kind of starting from zero, I guess.
Yeah. So, Kate, I see. Great question. Oftentimes, what I would guide is have a chat with your boss, and and see if you can make this relevant to your boss and your unit. And sometimes it's enough just to do it on that level. Like you don't have to do it on a full organizational level. The more intimate you can make this, the better learning experience you will have, and therefore the better assignment you will create, if that makes sense, Katie. So I'd have a chat with your boss, say, look, I'm doing this assignment. I need to do it on some strategy. Would we do it in our team? Would we do it in our division? Would we do it in our organization? What do you think? Because bringing your boss into the loop is fantastic here. It also, it pushes you forward, and it perhaps pushes them forward into having a conversation about something that could be quite dynamic. So that would be the shortcut. I would. It's not a shortcut. It's the wrong way to frame it, Katie. That would be that's the strategy I would employ.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you, everyone. Any other thoughts or questions? I do need to mention one other thing, which is obviously the use of excuse me, just dropped something. I wasn't running away. Dropped my pen. The use of generative AI, whether that's an AI, whether that's ChatGPT or whatever you use, whatever it is, your du jour, your Gen AI du jour. There is a policy from the IOB. You perhaps have received that. It should be housed within the IOB Learn. You should have gotten it as part of your enrollment, etc., or if not, you will be provided with it. But let me make it really simple. You, of course, can use ChatGPT to augment your work. If you do, you must state that within your submission. But I underpin augment. You could use it to help you do some research. You could do it to test and check and push your thinking. You could do it to improve your writing, etc., etc. But you must not replace your submission with generative AI content, because that's just not not what we want. And there is technology that's used, obviously, to scan and check for that, albeit, you know, it's not always perfect. So I would say, on principle, folks, you know, try and do the work yourself. There are many studies emerging in the world where, you know, the cognitive, creative capacity of people is diminishing significantly by the outsourcing of their thinking to generative AI. Not so when you use it right, in terms of partnering and pushing and using it as a sparring partner. I like to think about generative AI be a sparring partner. If you understand the difference between being your servant, you get it to do things for you. As a sparring partner, you get it to enhance and stretch your thinking and indeed your knowledge and so on and so forth. So, you know, the simple rule is, of course, you can use it. You must cite how you used it. And please, I would ask you, and I think IRB would ask you, and you hopefully would ask of yourself, please don't use generative AI to produce the outcome for all the obvious reasons, if that's okay. So just thought I'd mention that to everybody as well. I'm really conscious of the time. There's a good few questions, and maybe I need to cater more time for questions, folks. So that's on me. But thank you all for staying. It's fully recorded, so everyone will get it. We aren't due to see you back again until the what did I say it was? It was the 12th of April, wasn't it? Something, yeah, the 12th of April. But you have 3 weeks now to get stuck in and get your submission done. Lots of you have reached out. Please, I'm really happy for you to do that. I'll give you whatever time I can amidst Pretty Mad Diary, doing lots of interesting stuff. I always endeavour to get back to everybody and give everybody time as they need it. So WhatsApp me, link me, email me, drop me a mail. You have all those details, or give me a call if it's urgent. Of course, I will get to you. My job is to make sure that that you get what you need and get you learning, and then get you writing a good assignment. Don't panic. Do your best. We typically have a good rate of assignment scores, and let's make sure we continue that. So I should call it for the evening and let you all go, unless there's anything. I'll just do a quick check-in on the chat. Is there anything I missed? No.
Thank you, Garma.
No, thank you, everybody. And I'm just going to cut that Alistair Coburn piece in as well. So I'll do that afterwards as well. So I'll stop sharing and I'll give you a little wave good night. And I hope you have a good evening. And,
Thanks, Garvin.
Thank you, Garvin. All right. Very much. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, take care.
Thank you, Garvin.
Okay.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Carol.